tragedy has stricken. Is my mic working? Yeah, tragedy has stricken this channel. So this camera right here, I bought this camera last November of 2020, and it served me well. The camera I used for this channel for a long time, and I used it today to record a new reaction video. Stay tuned for that one. A highly requested person in the reaction series of videos I've been doing. I'll try to get that edited and uploaded soon. But this is a video, or this was a camera I used to record the green screen portion, and when I was unscrewing it to on the tripod to screw in my DSLR camera, I dropped this from the tripod and it landed on the lens and it's broken. This camera that served me for over a year is broken, and I don't know if it's worth the money to get it fixed, so I might just sell it as is on eBay or to a camera shop around here or something, because like I said, this camera's fine. I mean, the camera that I have plugged in right now does everything that I need it to do. So a little bit of an update, but this is my first stream that I've done since when? Probably early December, so hopefully we can get back to the success that was. The point of the stream is just to generally talk about things related to sports betting. I'll answer your questions about sports betting that you have, as well as anything in general. If you want to talk about something other than sports betting, I am here to talk about it. I'm letting the audience drive this stream. That's the whole point. But yeah, I kind of had to scramble to get this stream ready, because I use this camera for streams because the plug that powers into the power jack is long enough to where I don't have to, but I created like a rig to plug into the camera up there, so we'll see how that works. All right, so like I said, I hope everyone had a good holiday season. We got a lot going on. We got NFL playoffs starting next week. We have college football championship game on Monday between Alabama and Georgia, which honestly is a little bit boring. And then we also have college basketball. Can't forget about that. A lot going on. This is usually a good time of the year for me. But, yeah, a lot going on. So I guess to recap what's going on lately is that it seems like no matter where you go these days, and I think I've created a video about this, but it seems like no matter where you go these days, sports betting is front and center everywhere. And it's hard to get ridiculous because, like, everybody believes they are a sports betting expert now. Whether it be on TV or the radio. So I don't think a lot of people understand the backstory of how sports betting truth came to be. So I worked for a TV station in Louisville, Kentucky known as Wave 3 News, and our main competitor, WDRB 41, had a very strong sports department, right? And not only did they have a strong sports department, but they had a very strong digital online presence for sports as well. They had Katie George, who is now a sideline reporter at ESPN, so she was there at the time. But they had a very strong online presence. And so what we wanted to do at Wave was create an even better online presence when it came to sports. And I said, the one thing that they are not doing at WDRB, they were not covering sports betting. I was like, this is a big opportunity for us. It is. And so we really went all in on the sports betting angle for our Wave 3 online sports coverage, with me, being the centerpiece of that. And things were pretty good for a few months, and then we got bought out by Gray Television. We were owned by Raycom Media at the time. This cup says Raycom on here, but we were owned by Raycom Media at the time, and then Gray Television buys us out, doesn't see the value of what we were doing. They cleaned out my department, and I was gone. And yeah, I do have hard feelings to Gray Television today. But anyway, in order to keep that going, because we had done a lot of good sports betting related content, that's why I created Sports Betting Truth. Now, it was about a year after I had gotten the shaft from Gray TV until I created Sports Betting Truth in July of 2019. But I understand what worked, what didn't work, and I wanted to make sure before I launched the channel I knew what I wanted to do. So that's how Sports Betting Truth came to be. It's because I was originally doing it for a TV station in Louisville, Kentucky, and then I was like, I want to keep that going. I want to keep doing that. And the whole point of Sports Betting Truth was to give actual sports betting advice without the touting, pick selling, lying, shilling, scamming, false promises, false hype, all that stuff. Because if you go to YouTube and you search anything sports betting related, it's going to be garbage, mostly garbage. When I was looking for the video to do today, man, I don't know why this happens. I don't know if it's cam link or what, but you can see how the frame rate's all messed up. But when I was looking for content for my next reaction video that I recorded this morning, that when I dropped the camera, there's so much crap you have to wade through. I was like, wow, it's like a buffet of crap that you have to wade through when it comes to sports betting videos. I mean, I have an endless supply of sports betting related content. I do, because, wow, there is so much bad advice out there. But the one I did this morning, I think you guys are going to like it because it's been a requested video in the comments, and it's going to be good. All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, Robert McPherson. Good evening, Test FN, Test LN. Good evening, Ahmed. You should react to Bill Benter, How to Make $1 Billion on Horse Racing. Gives you an insight on how hard making money in betting is. Yes, it is. Audio is pretty much on the left side. That's right. So, hey, thanks for letting me know that. I just installed Windows 11 today. Hopefully it should be fixed now. But I just installed Windows 11 today, and it like ruined a lot of things. I don't know why, but and the frame rate's all choppy too. I thought that was just limited to this camera, but I guess it happens on that camera as well. How are you doing, Collier? How are you doing, Jay Boak? So I see a lot of familiar faces in here. So, without spoiling the reaction video I did today, the subject of the video was how to make a side income betting on sports. And they just make it seem so easy. They're like, oh, it's all you have to do is this. And I'm like, that was the flaw in the video. You guys will see it when I have it edited and uploaded. Yeah, that's not the first time it's happened. It happened on my work computer today, and so that's how I knew exactly what was going on, because I installed Windows 11 across all my computers. So this is my work computer. I have my personal laptop under the desk and then my desktop. But you guys, like I said, you guys are going to see the reaction video that I did this morning. And here's the problem, is that the general premise that he had in this video was that all you have to do is win 1 unit on average per day. And I'm like, if I could win 1 unit on average per month, I would be happy, because as you guys all know, if you watch my videos, winning is hard. And this guy's like, you just have to win 1 unit per day, 30 units per month, and you're good. I'm like, if it only were that easy, right? If it only were that easy. I mean, how many people would kill to guarantee themselves to win 1 unit per month, let alone 1 unit per day? I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And so that was the whole concept of this video. I was just like shaking my head, but yeah. Robert McPherson with a great question. Have you ever looked into horse racing? I love speed rating. So I wanted to, because working at a TV station in Louisville, Kentucky, I mean, that's the horse racing capital of the world. I mean, Churchill Downs, I was just there this past Sunday. I actually spent a day in Louisville this past Sunday. I took a little 4-day road trip because I was supposed to go to the TCU basketball game at KU this past Saturday, but it got canceled, and I still had all my hotel rooms and everything. So I still went to St. Louis, but instead of going to Kansas City, I actually rebooked my hotel for Louisville because I used to live there. I just wanted to catch up with some old friends because I haven't been there since I left. So I did stop by Churchill Downs. It was raining, but, I wanted to watch the Rose Bowl there, and so that's where I watched the Rose Bowl, at Churchill Downs. Utah and Ohio State. And I told you guys, the only way Utah was going to win that game is if Ohio State didn't care, because the talent gap was too big. And Ohio State didn't care in the first quarter, but then they started caring, and Utah had no chance. But yeah, and then the Sugar Bowl. A lot of people are going to, I'm not a Baylor fan, I went to TCU, and a lot of people are like, oh, Baylor only won because Matt Corral got hurt. But don't forget, TCU beat Baylor with a backup quarterback. No excuses, Ole Miss. No excuse. But yes, speaking of horse racing, I wanted to get into it because, like I said, living in Louisville, having a sports betting related, being a sports betting related guy for the TV station, I wanted to get into it, but like I said, they pulled the plug on our operation too soon, and I could not do that. And I just haven't got into horse racing since. But it would be interesting. It really would, to see if there's any angles there, because I feel like that's one sport that you might be able to find an edge in. If you really do your homework and everything. But then again, you're betting on horses, and anything can happen. But like I said, it's all about the long run. But it's crazy. There's a lot of horse players in Las Vegas. If you've ever been to the sports books, they are a dime a dozen. Collier, the question I most want to ask is this: how do you think the media should cover sports betting? I think they should be upfront and honest about the true challenge that it poses. Like I said, I don't think the average Joe understands how hard it is to win at sports betting. Like, it's so hard. And you see all these ads, these commercials, not just for sports betting, but like DraftKings and all that are all about, people winning money and like being showered with cash and all that stuff. I just don't think the average person understands the mountain you have to scale just to win long term. Most people are going to try and fail, and I don't think the media accurately covers that, probably because they have a lot of advertising that is spent with them in terms of sports betting, so they're not going to, rain on their cash cow, because if people found out that sports betting is very hard to win at, then people wouldn't do it and sign up for these books and DraftKings and FanDuel and all that, and then FanDuel and DraftKings wouldn't have the money to buy advertising on these networks. So it's one of those things you just have to kind of find out on your own or through trial and error. Because like I said, everybody thinks they're an expert when it comes to sports betting. Like, especially when they haven't done it before, everyone's like, oh, how hard can it be? I know a lot about sports. I watch sports. All I have to do is just bet on sports, and I'll make so much money hand over fist. You have all these people here in Texas that want it to be legalized here, and I don't know if it will happen, just because I feel like the Oklahoma and Louisiana casino lobbies are too strong. But it's one of those things that, how do I put it? Drawing a blank here. But yeah, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. I just don't think the average Joe understands how hard it is, And it's not like you're going to lose all your money at once, right? For most people, you're going to lose your money slowly over the long run, and people don't really realize that they're losing. Because a lot of people have a short-term selection bias. So say a person loses $500 betting on sports over the span of a year, and say they go win $40 on one day. They're going to be like, oh, I just won $40. No, you've actually lost $460, because I believe everything should be scaled based on how much you've lost all time betting on sports, not just how much you just won today or this week or this month. Ever since the very first sports bet you ever placed, are you up or down? Most people are going to be down. Man, I wish I understand why the frame rate, it's all weird when I'm doing this. Let me try something real quick. Hold. I don't know, and I don't care, as long as you guys can hear me. I'm so thirsty. I had a salad, probably with a lot of salt in it, so... All I heard was Miami was guaranteed to win tonight on a popular betting YouTube site. Yeah, that's the thing. That's one thing that kind of frustrates me when I'm looking for content to do my reaction videos, is that you see these people, or you see these videos that get so many more views than my videos get, because most people, when they're seeking out sports betting related content, are looking for two things. They're looking on advice on how to win, so they're going to click on all these videos with the title, How to Win at Sports Betting or whatever, or they're looking for picks. And I really don't offer either of those things on my channel. I am the person that people come to after they've lost, after they've watched all these channels out there that give horrible advice that they follow and lose. I am like the end of the funnel when it comes to sports betting YouTube channels. Right? People come to me after they've watched all those other channels and failed and lost money. That's where I come in, and I kind of set the record straight and tell people, hey, this is the reality of sports betting, and if you want to continue, this is what you're up against. And I think a lot of people, that's why people appreciate what I do, but it's why I'm never really probably going to get big, is because I don't tell people what they want to hear. I could easily grow this channel double, triple, quadruple the subscriber count easily if I told people what they want to hear. If I made videos saying, do this to win, or here are some winning picks, I could easily do that, but I'm not going to sell myself out. It's for the same reason. If you guys ever email me, by the way, the email address on my YouTube channel, sometimes I might not see it because I get so many emails from people wanting to collaborate or wanting to sponsor me that are touts or like shady operations. I'm not going to associate myself with that. But like I said, I could easily grow this channel by 5 times in a year if I sold out. I could easily make 5 times as much money in ad revenue and sponsorship deals than I do if I sold out, but I don't. I want to keep this channel pure, so I hope you guys can appreciate that. David McCula says, 1 unit per month is easy if you don't try to handicap NCAA basket. Why not hit the low-hanging fruit? Well, I mean, you can. There is low-hanging fruit. I'm not going to lie, but most people don't have the patience for that. Most people are greedy, and that's something I hit up on my reaction video today, that when you guys will see me talk about that, is that most people are greedy, and when they're winning, most people tend to double down rather than stay the course and keep a steady hand and stay disciplined, because I think everyone's guilty of that. I went through this last year when I had my college basketball second half model that you saw on my streams for those of you who tuned in last year. So when I was living in Las Vegas last winter, I had a college basketball second half model that was killing it for like a 3-week span. It was hitting like 65%, and it felt like I couldn't lose. I was like, I'm probably going to be limited at some point. But the thing is that it's so tempting when you're on such a heater like that to like double or quadruple your unit sizes, and try to ride the wave. But the thing is, when I did do that, there was one night I was like, you know what, I'm going to double my unit sizes. I'm leaving money on the table. And guess what? I went 6-17 that night, and I lost and because I doubled my unit sizes, I pretty much lost like the past 3 days of winnings on that one night alone. And I would much rather leave money on the table than overbet and lose a lot of money, right? I've been on both sides, and the feeling that you have when you're like, man, I shouldn't have bet that much is a lot worse than, man, I should have bet more. That is very true. I don't know if you guys might disagree with me, and there's people who disagree, but at least that's me. I would much rather have the feeling of, man, I should have bet more than, man, I bet too much. Any day of the week. Any day of the week. Yep. Zodwick wants to know, why is the Bama-Georgia game going to have a different outcome after being played 1 month later? I don't think it's going to have a different outcome. I think Alabama's going to win. I do. I don't think they're going to win by as much as they beat Georgia a month ago, but Georgia's the favorite, and I just think that Alabama's a more complete team when they're operating on all cylinders, and their one loss this year to Texas A&M. I just felt like Texas A&M played out of their minds in that game, and they had a very strong home field advantage as well that got to Alabama, which is not going to affect Alabama. Now, Cincinnati, they had their opportunities in the first half. I'm not going to lie. Cincinnati had their opportunities in the first half, but they just couldn't execute, and that's the problem with a team like Cincinnati. I mean, they were very similar to the TCU team I played for. We knew when we played Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl that we weren't going to have the offense to win in like a shootout, right? That's where these G5 teams are going to struggle against teams like Alabama. They're going to struggle on the offensive line. They're going to struggle running the ball. So in order to equalize that, you're going to have a strong mid to long-range passing game and hit some big plays with your skill position players, and that's where Cincinnati was lacking. They didn't have enough explosive athletes at the skill position, specifically wide receivers, to compensate for the fact that they weren't going to be able to run the ball against Alabama like they were able to run the ball against teams in the American Conference, and that was always going to be their downfall. They just didn't have the skill position players to do it, and that's why they only scored 6 points. But give credit to their defense. They did do a good job at shutting Alabama's offense down for the most part, and you got to give them credit for that. A lot of people are like, ooh, we should never see a G5 team in the playoff again. That's so stupid. I'm going to say this. I don't think Cincinnati was a top 4 team. I don't. With that being said, you can't use their performance against Alabama as a referendum against all G5 teams in the future, right? First of all, they didn't really get beat that bad in the context of some other teams that have got beat bad in the semifinals and the playoffs in the past. And second of all, everything's relative. Cincinnati did have to pull an inside straight just to get there. They did. And that might happen again in the future, the inside straight to where just there's no other options. That's why Cincinnati got in. There's just no other options. I mean, who else were you going to put in? All right. Isn't the hold on horses 25%? How would you beat that? I don't think it's 25% because horses is pari-mutuel betting. There's definitely a hold, but it's not 25%. Rashim wants to know, do you feel like the Kardashian family is overhyped? That's a good question, actually. I know I used to have, don't judge me for this, but when I worked in the cable side of the business, one of the networks I was assigned to was E! And I had to keep up with shows like The Kardashians and Real Housewives. Bravo is one of my networks too, so that's why. But anyway, it's really not that bad of a show, The Kardashians. It's not. Do I think they're too self-absorbed? Do I think they're good role models? No, but they're really not that as bad of people as people think. It's just that they just, what do they do, right? But no, I don't think they're overhyped. They are what they are. They're a marketing tool, and they bring in a lot of business for a lot of different things. And I think Kim Kardashian does have a good cause with her legal reform causes. So they're not all bad. They're not. I've watched the show. I used to watch the show all the time because I had to for work, and they're really not that bad of people. I think they get a bad rap. All right. Robert McPherson, yeah, it's tough, but nearly all money on horses goes on the favorite, so there can be bigger edges of bigger. That is very true. That is very true. And then Robert also says, I'm way down on sports betting, not as much as poker, though. That's one thing I wish I did more when I lived in Las Vegas is play poker. I never really... The real reason I didn't when I was in Las Vegas last year, the mask. I didn't want to wear a mask when playing poker. I'm sorry. I know people say that'll give you an advantage because they can't read your face and stuff, but I can't stand masks. I had to wear a mask for the first time getting on the plane a couple weeks ago to go to Salt Lake City. I hate it. But apart from that, no. Yeah, so Zodwick is right. Las Vegas made their all-time highest sports betting handle in the month of November. So there are plenty of people betting on sports these days. David McCula. Horse racing is generally run in a pari-mutuel system. Bettors bet into a massive, efficient pool. The track and off-tracks take 25% before paying out. I don't think it's 25% everywhere because that's a little bit ridiculous. That's too high. Like, that would be... There is no casino game. I mean, I think Keno maybe, but most casino games don't even have a house edge that high. Yeah, exchanges have between 8 and 20% over on the book. Yeah, that sounds like predict it. Joe McMillian, who does your model say is going to win on the Super Bowl? I don't have an NFL model. I don't. And I really haven't paid enough attention to the NFL to... Okay, the frame rate's better anyway. But I haven't paid enough attention to the NFL to really give an educated guess. I just hope it's not the Cowboys. I can't stand the Cowboys. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're from Texas. You're born and raised in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Why aren't you a Cowboys fan? And I say that because my dad, usually your NFL fandom is formed when you're a kid based on who your dad roots for. And my dad was an Oilers fan. And the Oilers moved from Houston when I was like 6. And so... he stopped caring about the Oilers, but one thing my dad never was a Cowboys fan. He hated the Cowboys. And so he raised me more of a Cowboys hater than anything, and that really hasn't changed. So I don't really have a favorite NFL team, but I have a least favorite NFL team, and that is the Cowboys. So anybody but the Cowboys is where I lean on the NFL. Yes, it does take a lot of discipline to grind out a profit. If you're like I've been there. I've had models, college football, college basketball, that have profited. And whenever you're on a hot run, it is so tempting to be like, I got this all figured out. I have a money-making machine that prints money. I'm going to go all in. But you cannot do that because you will regress to the mean. The only thing being, you hope when you do regress to the mean, you don't regress enough to wipe out your edge and profit and everything. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Yep, that's why he always underestimates the odds variable to underbet. Yep, Ahmed is absolutely right. Robert McPherson, do you ever use ELO rating to pick value outright division winners? The problem with ELO is that it's too simple. There's some sports where it makes sense where you just don't have enough stats to work on, but it's too simple for sports like baseball, because especially with baseball, it's not so much about the team as it is the pitchers and lineups. It's really not going to work for football. You gotta have to have some sort of scoring, like points scored and points against at the very least, to have some sort of ELO-based model, which is what Jeff Sagarin does. So that's how I view about that. Hedge fund management says, I understand your point, but could you please release just one pick per week, let's say every Friday, then do it for us and also grow the channel? That's the thing. I'm not really currently running any models right now. I'm not. So it's like, I don't have any way to give an educated pick. So any pick I would give would just be pulled out of my ass, so to speak, and I'm not going to do that to you guys. As much as I'd like to. Like I said, I could easily grow this channel if I turned it into like a picks channel, but I don't. Man, I'm so bummed about my camera. Anyway, I digress. Rasheem wants to know, what's your thought on every day it's a new player transferring? I hate it. I made a video about this before the college football season started about NIL, but I really hate it. I hate NIL. I don't think NIL would be as bad if there wasn't a free-for-all transfer. Like, they have to bring back the rule where you have to sit if you transfer. They do. Otherwise, NIL is going to ruin college football. It's going to, because you have all these players who are entering the transfer portal to go play Let's Make a Deal with all these schools out here and go play The Price is Right. Like Zach Evans, TCU running back, like he's out there playing The Price is Right with all these schools right now. Let's make a deal. Who's going to give him what's behind door number 2? How much money is in the envelope, right? It sucks. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's only fair that the players can make money. And I'm like, there has to be some sort of regulation, though. Every other sporting league in the world has some sort of like regulations and rules and stuff when it comes to this stuff. And now you have teams like Texas A&M who are out there outputting their paycheck or their checkbooks to sign these recruiting classes. And it's absolutely ridiculous. It is. Like, Texas A&M is spending so much money on these recruiting classes. Like, where does it begin? It's the Wild West out there, and I hate it. And the thing is, this is all brought upon to us by football-hating media pundits that, hate football, are the ones who push the whole players need to be paid unionized stick on us, right? I played college football. It's been 11 years since I last suited up for TCU, and if anyone got paid on our team, I didn't know. I was roommates with a couple of guys who went to the NFL, and they were always asking me for money. So if they did get paid, they didn't spend their money very wisely, but I doubt they were being paid. But, that was 11 years ago, and we weren't really a big-name team. And people are always saying, oh, it's always happened, but it was under the table, so there's only so much you could do. But now that it's legal, it's like there's no reining it in, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Zodwick says, now that we're in conference play, which mid-major is under the radar? I'm going to go with a team probably no one's talking about, and that's Nicholls State. I saw this team play in person back in November, and no one's talking. They played a pretty tough non-conference schedule, and they're a team that can get into the NCAA tournament maybe as a 14, 15 seed, and they're good enough to win a game. I've seen them play. They're good. Another team I would look out for in the mid-major ranks. That's the thing. I haven't paid as much attention to college basketball so far as I usually do. Not saying I haven't paid attention, but you've had teams that have flamed out, like St. Bonaventure. They're 8-3, which isn't bad, but they were a top 25 team to start the year, and they've kind of not delivered. People are going to talk about Colorado State because they're undefeated, but I do think they'll come down to earth a little bit. UT Chattanooga, I would watch out for them in the Southern Conference. And Furman as well. Furman did beat Louisville, but they've kind of flopped in some of their other non-conference games, but they're still good. They still have the talent to make a run. So the Southern Conference should be interesting. There's a lot of good teams in there. So keep an eye out for those teams. But UT Chattanooga is really one that I would definitely look at. All right. Nice haircut, by the way. Yeah, I got my haircut this morning. I was actually supposed to get it done last Wednesday, but my stylist was sick, and so I just rescheduled it for today. No, it wasn't COVID. She told me that today. For those of you who don't, I already got COVID, guys. For me, I used to get sinus infections all the time, like 2 or 3 times a year I would get a sinus infection, and when I got COVID, I've had sinus infections that were 1,000 times worse than my COVID. So at least for me, it's not bad. But then again, I'm very healthy young adult. Not a lot of comorbidities out there. So, man, I'm gonna post a stream on my Twitter account. How do I share it? All right, maybe I can get some more viewers from Twitter. All right. For those of you who, I don't know. So about a year ago, I had a Twitter account that was verified with a blue check mark, and I had about 5,000 followers, and I got banned. Twitter banned my account. And they finally unbanned me in November, but they took away my badge, and they took away all my followers. So I restarted my Twitter account a couple months ago, and now I have 106 followers. So that's about 2% of the followers I used to have. So if you want to follow me, at WCLEISS, let me know and I'll follow you back. That's what I miss the most about my Twitter account, is the interaction I had with my followers and everything, and being able to talk about things. And I don't really have that right now because only 106 people follow me. But if you do want to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, I would appreciate that, because, like I said, I miss that. I miss the interactions I used to have. But anyway. It was about a year ago. I want to say it was January 10th or January 12th, something like that, where they shut me down. And that sucks. All right. Real BBB says, can you talk about your process in deciding to bet a game? Say you're a model which finds 20 CFB games with spread different than the line. Do you bet all 20 or do you examine those 20 and only bet some? That's a great question. I would look at my video about keys, Keys, keys. I explain at least some of my processes for that, but you want to create a good key generator that gives you some leeway so you can find out what to bet on and what not to. But that's how I would always do it. No, I wouldn't bet every game I had a perceived edge on. Usually my keys were a little bit more strict than that, and that's how I would do it. But the thing with keys is that it's always a moving target, and so you really need to find the sweet spot. And also, if it's too far off the line, it's usually negative value. So you want to, I call it the high-low approach, meaning I would cap the key I would find basically I would create a graph and find out where it started going down at the top and kind of like create like a cross section of how far off the line it needed to be, like a minimum and a maximum. Because like I said, if it's too far off, then your model's most likely going to be wrong, and Las Vegas knows something that you don't. That's what I found. Association beats. Any tips on modeling fantasy football? Are you talking about season-long fantasy or daily fantasy? Because with daily fantasy, I'd never have given that a shot, but I did do it with baseball, and I did some videos on that on my channel for baseball. But I imagine football is a little bit harder just because you don't have the individual players, but instead usage stats and everything like that. I would always say I did have an idea of how to do football, is that you want to create like a hybrid team player approach and, determine the strength of the offenses and defenses and everything. But that's tough. Creating a football model is tough, but it's, there's probably optimizers out there that are going to be smarter. I could create like a whole video on that topic alone. Association beats. Hedge Fund wants to know, what happened to your betting models? You mean you're doing sports betting just for fun the past 3 months? I'm not betting at all. I have not betting at all. The thing with models is, at least the ones I have, is they were just too much work, too much maintenance, too much. They're like a house of cards almost, especially with the data sources in college football going haywire at one point, and it just wasn't worth the stress. I talked about this on the last time I streamed, but I got a lot going on in my life with work and my life outside of my channel and everything. I just felt like it was time to take a break from it all. Maybe one day I'll go back to it, but it was just becoming to the point where I was feeling obligated to do it and was no longer enjoying it rather than enjoying it. And don't do things you don't enjoy. That's what I'm always going to say. Don't do things you don't enjoy. Don't force anything. Harold Bolding says, where do you think Caleb Williams will end up and how much money will he get? I mean, obviously USC is the place, right? I mean, USC's got to be the front runner, but he's going to get a lot of money. He's out there playing Let's Make a Deal right now, and he's going to get a ton of money. Not Alabama, because they have Bryce Young. Texas A&M was another place that I've heard, because they're spending money more than anybody else in the country. So I would say it's going to be a race between USC and Texas A&M, and it's going to be a huge contract to the point where he'll probably take a pay cut going to the NFL if he does with that rookie contract. So I hate all this NIL stuff. I really do. Joe McMillian wants to know, when do you think Texas will legalize online sports gambling? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's ever a priority for the legislature. I think the way it will happen is if it comes down from a nationwide mandate from the federal level. I don't know if it's ever going to happen at the state level. I mean, I'm sure it'll happen one day, but I think it's like a game of chicken right now. They're waiting for like the federal government to say sports betting legal everywhere. It's just never been a priority. Maybe it'll happen, but like I said, I don't think people understand how powerful the Oklahoma and Louisiana casino lobbies are. They pay the politicians in Texas of both parties. It's not a partisan thing, both parties, to keep gambling illegal in Texas. They do. That way all the people go to Oklahoma and Louisiana. Robert McPherson, could you do a talk radio style show just chatting about upcoming games? Maybe have a few guests on chatting about the best players, whatever you're interested in. I've thought about that, bringing on guests and everything. I just need streaming software to be able to handle guests and everything, which I use OBS, which is fine for just myself. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure how I would add a guest on it, but I should have a guest, right? I should. But talk about upcoming games. I kind of used to do that for football, college football, back in September and October, for those of you who remember. And I felt like I was covering too much ground. It probably would have been better just to talk about like 5 or 6 games rather than every single game. But I was talking about it from a betting perspective and showing my model outputs and everything. So that's why I did it the way I did it. Stephen James, what's your opinion on betting NHL hockey or NBA basketball? So great question, Stephen James. I've never bet on NHL before. I've always wanted to because I like the NHL. I'm a Stars fan. I think hockey would be fun to bet on. It would make it a lot more interesting. I've just never gotten around to making any kind of model or system for it. So, but trust me, I just said that I'm not betting on sports right now. I'm not running any active models. If I was going to jump back into it, it would be hockey. You know why? Because it would be something new. I think that's another reason why I've kind of drifted away from college basketball, college football, baseball. It's because it's not new. I've been doing those sports for 10 years. But I think hockey would present a new challenge, a new angle, something fresh and exciting. So when the day comes that I'm like, you know what, I want to build a model to bet with, it's going to be hockey. But as far as NBA, I've only bet on that one season. I had an NBA Monte Carlo model back in 2016, and it did very well in the month of December. Like, I was on a heater, hot streak. And then January came, and it nosedived. And so it looks like it was just beginner's luck. But I used that Monte Carlo model in a job interview, by the way. The whole reason I created it. And then I was like, oh, I should use this to bet with. How are you doing, Big Short 08? Good to see you. Ahmad wants to know, if you have time, you should react to Bill Benter. What are my odds presentation in 2004 when he gives good insight into betting? Good to know. Like I said, I'm always open to ideas for those reaction videos. I am. So like I said, do what Ahmad's doing and drop those videos you want me to react to. But I think you guys will like the one tomorrow. Robert McPherson, what are your thoughts on golf betting? Seems to me like the 2-ball and 3-ball betting markets have some value. You know, that's a great question. I actually created a video on golf betting last year because it was during the early stage of the pandemic and golf was like one of the only sports being played. So I created a video, it was more of a brainstorming video than anything, where I kind of was like, here are some ideas that you might take into consideration to create a golf betting model for. But I do believe if you can really wrangle the stats that you might be able to find an edge, but there's just so many variables in golf, so many variables that makes it kind of hard for things to be consistent, especially the courses, because there's a lot of courses that are played every year and really don't change much, but you have the courses and the weather and the field conditions, and there's just so much that goes into it, so many variables that seems like it'd be overwhelming, even more than baseball, which I think is a sport that has the most variables. But golf, I feel like it would have even more. But I did make a video on that. Big Short 08 says, join Getter. I've thought about it, and I probably should at some point. Did you see Joe Rogan join Getter, and he already has 8 million followers? It's crazy. Eagles01 says, who wins the national title game? I've said I think it's going to be Alabama. Do I think they win by 17 like they did a month ago? No, I don't. But I do think that they're the better team. I think that they won by 17 for a reason, and they match up well with Georgia. They do. I think Michigan was a great matchup for Georgia because Michigan was never going to have the offense to score on that Georgia defense. And Alabama does. But here's the thing. Cincinnati did a good job containing Alabama's offense. You got to give Cincinnati credit. Although, Cincinnati left some points on the table. All right. Robert McPherson, there are good free sources for UK football. Are you talking about Kentucky football or United Kingdom soccer? You ever considered doing it because the access is easier? For me to bet on a sport, I'd have to be interested in it. And no offense to people who play soccer or bet on soccer or watch soccer, but I just can't get into it. I can't. I've tried. I just can't. I'll watch the World Cup, and I'll probably watch the World Cup this summer. But apart from that, I can't. I just have no interest in the Premier League or whatever. So what are the leagues? Premier League, La Liga, I don't even know. just can't get into it. And so that's the thing. You have to be interested enough in the sport you're modeling for to make it far enough to complete a good model. And I don't think I'd ever make it in soccer. Rasheem wants to know, who are your top 10 college football teams for 2022? You know, I don't even know. Like I said, there's so much fluidity and inconsistency now with the transfer portal and NIL and all that it makes it really hard to, you kind of have to wait for the dust to settle almost in order to start like handicapping that type of stuff. But obviously you're going to have your Alabamas and Georgias out there. I think you have your teams like USC, who's going to be a big fish in a small pond now with Lincoln Riley going over there, and NIL. You got to put Texas A&M just because of the sheer monstrosity of their recruiting class they put together. I know they paid a lot of money for it, more money than they probably should have, but you got to factor them in. And then Ohio State, of course, you know, the way they closed the season, you got to give them credit as well. So those are probably going to be the top 5. And then you have your teams that are going to not be very good. Texas, I think, is one of them. I can't wait to see them flop again. So I think you guys saw, remember when Texas played Arkansas and I was streaming that Saturday and I had like a graphic on the screen that said I hate Texas. For those of you who don't know, Texas hatred is like part of my family because my dad was going to go there on scholarship, and they pulled his scholarship when my dad got sick his senior year. And that's why my dad ended up going to TCU instead. But ever since then, he's hated Texas. Like he wants to beat Texas in every sport more than anything else. And so that's how my dad instilled Texas hatred into me. And it makes it kind of hard because I've dated some girls who were Texas grads or Texas fans, and it's like, what do you do? And so I just am myself, and I hate Texas, and they can deal with it. You know, it's not like I'm going out with them anymore, obviously, but it has happened a few times in the past. You know, it is what it is. All right. TJ Nichols says, saw your video on Oddsham. They preach bet Pinnacle Arbs. I mean, I don't think betting Pinnacle Arbs is a bad strategy if you take the fact that Pinnacle probably does have the sharpest lines, but they act like it's not something you have to pay for. That's where I have the problem with Oddshams, is they're making you pay for something you can do yourself, right? Especially if you created a good enough scraper or something to get the odds yourself. You don't need to pay Oddsham for that. And you know, it's a strategy, but it's one that will require a lot of patience, and the margins are going to be very small. So that's another thing you have to look out for. Real BBB says, Brett Hull's foot was in the crease. Yeah, but I don't care. The Stars won the Stanley Cup in 99. It's funny. I'll never forget that Stanley Cup game in 99 because the game ended at like 2 a.m, right? And me and my dad, obviously, stayed up to watch it, and we were hungry, you know, and they were going into a third overtime or whatever, and we were like, what's open? And there's a Jack in the Box down the street that was open that we drove to. But the thing is, since it was like 2 a.m, they were running on a skeleton crew, so they took a while to get our food. So we actually heard the goal in the car on the radio. Deep in the heart of Texas, the stars are shining. That was the call. Hedge Fund Management says, once you come back, please consider my suggestion. Like I said, one bet or pick a week. I don't know. I mean, I used to post pics on my Twitter account, my old one that got banned. But they were just model outputs. Aidan OBrien, were you ever profitable over at least 12 months in your sports betting journey? I was. 2018, my college basketball model profited like 17 units, and then my college football model in 2018 in the back end profited like 25. So that was 42 units of profit in 2018. And then 2019, my college football model profited maybe 6 units. And then November, December, college basketball was up a lot. But apart from that, apart from that, 2017, I don't think so, because I think the NBA model in January canceled out the meager profit I had in college football on the back end. But college basketball, did very well in December. So yeah, I have, but not since 2019. Ecking Fight News wants to know, do you ever look at indicators based on the money splits, bet percentage, and money percentage? I used to, but then I realized that information is probably not accurate. I'm not saying they're making the numbers up, but it's probably such a small subsample of data that it doesn't tell you the whole story. And just because I believe that information is too valuable to give away for free or even give away for a subscription, because really, if you know where the money's going and everything, then you're going to know how the market thinks and how the market reacts. And that information is just too valuable to give away for free. So that's why I don't look at that stuff anymore, because I just don't think the information, I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but I don't think it's a big enough subsample of data that they're giving you to make an accurate decision. Richard Niven wants to know, is it a better strategy to bet on games every day at high volume or a few times a month instead by waiting for the right conditions within games to come up? I created a video on this. I think it's titled The Great Debate, Volume Betting versus, like sniper betting, something like that. Myself, I've always said bet when you feel like you have an edge, whether that's one game a month or 100 games a day. If you feel like you have an edge, then you need to pull the trigger. But like I said, you need to have a good model to determine whether you have an edge or not, and err on the side of caution. Be conservative. I was always a volume guy myself. For those of you who remember when I did give out picks and did do my streams and everything, I've always been a volume bettor myself, probably to my own detriment, especially in 2021 and 2020. But there are times where volume betting has served me well. But it's probably not I feel like part of the reason I was a volume bettor, especially on my streams, was so I had games to pay attention to on my streams, and have action. If I wasn't streaming, I probably wouldn't have been as loose. But yeah, that's how I view it. It just depends on how you calculate your edges. And for some people, their edges only come across once a week or twice a week or once a day. Some people, their edges, they'll feel like they have 20 to 30 games a day with an edge. So it just depends on how you tune and calibrate your models. Chetta13, glad to catch you live. Just wanted to say thank you for teaching me about all this stuff. Making models and figuring out all of Excel's features has been more fun than gambling for me. I agree. The journey is fun, right? The journey is fun. And I remember when I first was getting into all this back 10, 15 years ago, I enjoyed the learning how to program and make Excel work and write code than I did actually betting on the games. But like I said, now I'm 10, 15 years later, especially when I do stuff like that for my job, it's not as fresh anymore. It's not as fun. So test FN, test LN. NHL, my experience is bet between after the trade deadline and before the playoffs is best. You're probably right. People always say bet the beginning of the season. I disagree. I think test FN, test LN is right. Eagles 01, I bet 500 in Alabama. Spread or money line? Stephen James, what information would I need to start an NHL model? Do you have any opinions? You just need a data source. And I think that NHL is probably a sport where you can get away with just box score data. Like, you don't need play-by-play data. I mean, I don't even think play-by-play data will really give you much information anyway. But fortunately for NFL, all you need is a box score and individual player stats to get that done. I would probably focus on things like face-off percentage. Goalies obviously is a big deal. It might be a good sport to do a player-based model in, although probably not as much as baseball. But I did that in college basketball last year, so it's a sport you could do that for as well. Eagles 01 wants to know, what do you think of the new TCU coach? That's a great question. I was not a big fan of his style. To be honest with you, I wish we hired somebody else. I'm just going to be honest. The thing with Dykes is that he's always been a great offensive coach, but his defenses has always been bad. So the success or failure of Sonny Dykes is going to rely on the defensive coordinator. That's going to be it. But success is measured differently these days. And with NIL and all that, and TCU is pretty far behind the curve on NIL. Like, we just lost our best running back because of that. Are we going to be able to compete? It's not that we don't have enough boosters or anything. It's just we're behind the curve on all that. And maybe that's the reason we went with someone like Sonny Dykes. But the flip side of NIL is you're going to have a lot of players who go to these schools and aren't getting any playing time. Yeah, they're getting paid, but they're not getting any playing time. And some of these players might want to play and boost their NFL prospects rather than riding the bench or not seeing the field but still getting paid, right? Because all these guys want to go to the NFL. And that's what it all comes down to. Pruitt Fitness, what's your thoughts on Vegas Dave? Oh, I think he's amazing. I think everybody should buy his picks. I really do. He will win you so much money if you follow him and see his billboards all over Las Vegas and you tail his picks. Him and Steve Stevens, amazing resources. They're going to win you so much money. I don't see why anyone would want to not buy their picks, I hope most of you guys know I'm joking. I think Vegas Dave's an idiot, but I think he's so, what's the word I'm looking for? I think he's so exotic and I think he's so erratic that I think people just know he's a fraud. You have some touts out there that are pretty suave and pretty smooth and how do you put it? I think they are they know how to market themselves to where they seem like they're legit and not some shyster fly-by-night scam artist. And that's where I think Steve Stevens and Vegas Dave hurt themselves, is they come across as fraudulent just by looking at them. But you have some guys out there that are pretty convincing. Ryan C says no goal. Hey, it's been almost 23 years. I think Buffalo Sabres fans need to move on. And even if that goal didn't count, the game still would have been tied. There's no guaranteed Buffalo would have won in that third overtime. And there's no guaranteed, even if Buffalo won that game, there's no guarantee they would have won Game 7. Remember that Stars had Eddie the Eagle Belfour in the net. He was playing very well. I mean, that Stars team was loaded. Mike Modano, Joe Neuendijk, Richard Matmachuk. I mean, you had some pretty good players. Even you had guys like Guy Carbonneau on there and Darian Hatcher, one of the best defensemen in the game at the time. Jeez. That Stars team was awesome, man. And then they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals again the next year with pretty much the same team. And they lost to the New Jersey Devils and Martin Brodeur. So, Hedge Fund Management says, my Twitter account is about 95% sports picks. No, you won't be banned for posting picks. I got banned for posting about politics. I got banned for my political post. No, they won't ban you for picks. Not at all. Rasheem wants to know, what's your thoughts on AEW wrestling? Oh, man. Great question. How do I put it? I feel like I really hate the AEW fan base. I think the AEW fan base is so annoying. They are so annoying. It's I feel like a lot of AEW's identity is based on not being WWE and hey, we're not WWE. They need to form their own identity. And I feel like AEW they try to play both sides of the fence. On one hand, they're oh, we have a real sports feel and we don't insult the audience intelligence. But on the other hand, they have too many small wrestlers that are contenders. Does anyone think Darby Allin or Sammy Guevara would be able to compete for a world heavyweight wrestling title if wrestling were real? Let's just, I know wrestling's fake and everything, but I still think it's insulting the audience for someone like Darby Allin, who's probably smaller than me. And I'm not that big of a guy. I'm about 165 pounds. But Darby Allin, he looks like a twig out there. You really think someone like him would be able to challenge for a world heavyweight title in a legit wrestling promotion? No. Think of the world heavyweight titles in the past of Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, big muscular guys. And then you have Darby Allin and Sammy Guevara. I think AEW has too many small, white, indie wrestlers that, do a lot of flips and stuff. They need more big guys. They do. I just feel like the whole promotion's almost like a cruiserweight division. And I think it just takes itself too seriously. And I have a lot of criticism about AEW. Do I watch it? I do. It's actually on right now. I'll probably watch it later. I don't watch it live usually. I'll watch Raw and SmackDown live, but I usually won't watch AEW live. I'll watch it off DVR. But it's too indie for me. And that's where WWE shines, is their production values are so great. And they have big guys, guys that are believable wrestlers, guys that you look at and feel wow, that guy can kick somebody's ass. AEW has too many small guys. I didn't know there was a Vegas Dave movie, Eagles 01. I mean, Vegas Dave he's a marketer, yes. He markets his touting service, but he comes across as too fake. Like some guys you just look at and you're like, that guy's a scam artist. That guy's a fraud. If Vegas Dave was smart, he wouldn't act like such a tool, right? Same with Steve Stevens. Like charisma matters. You need charisma if you're going to sell a scam like a tout operation, and they don't have charisma. The Keys videos, January 6, 2021. Wow, was that the first video I filmed in my Las Vegas apartment? It might have been. Steve Stevens isn't as bad as Vegas Dave, but he's still annoying. Mike Madonna, yeah, I mean, probably the all-time best star by far. I mean, there were some good stars, but like Mike Madonna was there his whole career except for his last season he was with Detroit. But yeah, like Mike Madonna is the Dirk Nowitzki of the Dallas Stars. Speaking of Dirk Nowitzki, he didn't he have his number retired tonight? Weren't the Mavs retiring his number tonight? But man, when I worked for ESPN Radio back in 2011, I got to do the Mavericks NBA Finals, the Rangers World Series, and the Super Bowl. Like I picked the perfect year to work at ESPN Radio. But that Mavericks team was so fun. Like post-game interviews in the locker room and stuff. They were all great guys. Like all of them didn't have any, like Dirk was a great guy to interview. You had to hold the microphone up, but him and Sean Marion and Jason Terry, and Jason Kidd, those were the four guys that I would always interview after the game. And I did the Stars too. The Stars didn't make the playoffs. They choked like in the last week. But it seemed like every Stars game I would cover for ESPN Radio, they would lose in overtime. And so I'd always have to go in the locker room after the game and they'd be disappointed. Like there was one game, I think they played Calgary. It was either Calgary or Anaheim, but they gave up a goal at the buzzer in the third period that forced overtime. Like the last shot of the third period I think it was the Flames. They were down 1 and it went in at the buzzer. And then they lost in a shootout, I think. But that was not a fun locker room to go in afterwards. And then the Rangers, they made the World Series and lost. I didn't do the road games, so the last game I did was the World Series Game 5, and that was after they had won, and we're one game away from winning the World Series, which they didn't do. But that was a fun Rangers team. But Josh Hamilton, he was weird because he would always be gone. I never got to interview Josh Hamilton because he would always leave the locker room because a lot of the Rangers players would drink beers and stuff after the game, and he couldn't be around alcohol at all, so I would never see him. So I'd always have to see him before the games and not after. But the best guy to interview with the Rangers was David Murphy and Arthur Rhodes. Arthur Rhodes was hilarious. I felt so bad when he got released, and then he gets signed by the Cardinals and pitches against the Rangers in the World Series and wins a ring. So he got the last laugh. Hedge Fund Management says, I also sometimes voice out in politics. Yeah, it's really hard not to. It's really hard not to talk politics on Twitter. I'm not going to lie there. But the thing is, Twitter is like 90% Democrats, and they just have the loudest voice in the room. That's why it's so hard. And I still follow all the news stations I used to work at, and they are so biased. That's the main reason I quit TV, is just the censorship and the bias was just too hard to deal with. And especially because my role in TV was primary research, so I did a lot of opinion research when it came to viewership, trying to turn around falling ratings, trying to get viewers engaged with our content. And the number one complaint that I would find when I had focus group for the TV stations I worked for was bias, political bias. And no one ever seemed to listen. I would always come up in my report is that political bias is the biggest problem in news, and the news directors didn't seem to care. The general managers didn't seem to care. So there's nothing we could really do about it. Wendy Espinoza says, what do you think about Detroit teams? Well, you have the Red Wings, who I think they suck. The Tigers, they are not great, but they're getting better. The Pistons are terrible, and the Lions are terrible. So if you're a Detroit fan, you better be a Michigan or Michigan State fan, because Detroit pro sports are all pretty miserable. Ryan C. says Twitter sucks. I agree, but it's a great way to promote my content. That's the only reason I have it. Eagles 01, are you excited for the 1-year anniversary of the day we took over the Capitol? Oh, man. I'm not going to turn the TV on at all tomorrow. All the soapboxing. And here's the thing. What are they not going to talk about? They're not going to talk about the Black Lives Matter riots that did $2 billion worth of damage in our country in the summer of 2020. More people were killed in those riots than the January 6th insurrection. Remember, the only person who was killed on January 6th was a protester. But they never talk about the Black Lives Matter riots that did so much damage, vandalism, and death in those. They're not going to talk about the January 20th, 2017 riots, the day Donald Trump was inaugurated. They're not going to talk about that. There was so much rioting on that day that no one knows about because it wasn't covered. And then let's not forget the time the Capitol was stormed in 2018 when Brett Kavanaugh hearings were going on. Does no one remember that? Does that not count as an insurrection? How does that not count as an insurrection? All the storming of the Capitol for Kavanaugh? But anyway, I digress. What I'm saying is that no, I'm not looking forward to it because they're going to make it out to be more than it really was. More than it really was. In my opinion, and if you want to shut me down for this, go ahead. But in my opinion, I think a lot of the January 6th protesting was led by FBI undercover agents. Who is Ray Epps? I believe the FBI had a lot of moles and implants that infiltrated and encouraged a lot of what happened. But let's be real. It was not as bad as people make it out to be. TJ Nichols, are you involved in crypto? I only got Bitcoin to deposit into sports books overseas. That's the only time I've ever done it. And I kind of regret cashing it out because I had it in a Bitcoin wallet and I cashed it out. If I had left it in there, it'd probably be worth a lot more than it was when I cashed out. Yeah, Wendy Espinoza, you pretty much need to rely on Michigan and Michigan State these days to enjoy Michigan sports because it's not going to come from the pros. Josh Hilton Outdoors, when do you start developing your MLB model? I want to say last year I started after March Madness. But I had a lot of the framework in place. It was almost a copy and paste job from the one I had in 2020 that I developed over June. Because remember, the season in 2020 started in late July, and I want to say I spent 6 weeks on it. So I had a lot of the framework in place. I just ported it over to Python. But yeah, if you're going to do an MLB model, you need to start, you need to give yourself a couple months. How do you feel about the Stars this year? Has Jamie Benn finally gotten old? I think the Stars are just, it sucks because they were such a strong defensive team, but now their defense isn't so great, and Ben Bishop's injury really hurt because they're not very good at goalie now. Are they good enough to make the playoffs? Yeah, but I just feel like their defense is not great. They have a lot of offensive playmakers, and I don't think Jamie Benn is too old yet. I don't. Like him and Tyler Seguin and Anton Radulov and, Klingberg and all them. They have a lot of good offensive talent, but defense is just going to be their downfall. Well, yeah, Aidan OBrien, no one talks about that. Remember, Donald Trump offered the National Guard to Nancy Pelosi, and she said no. Nancy Pelosi told the Capitol Police to stand down. They let the people come in because they wanted the optics. It was a inside job's probably the wrong way to put it, but they knew what they were doing. YouTube shut me down for a week last year. I don't know if you guys remember. Because I did a live stream like a month after the election talking about, my thoughts on how the election played out last year. Yeah. So why not give Jake Ottinger the starting job? I mean, he's young. He's a young goalie. That's why. I mean, he just hasn't proven himself yet. He has potential, but he's still pretty green. But yeah, goaltending is definitely the weakness of the Stars right now, for sure. Isla Bet wants to know, hey, William, do you use Python for building your sports betting model? I do. I also use R. I actually prefer R to Python, but Python does some things better than R, and R does some things better than Python. It's just a personal preference. Python might run a little faster, so if you're doing like a Monte Carlo-based model, you might want to do it in Python. But I love the data frames in R. Who is my top two? Rashid, my top two in what? Thomas Ford, do you do sports modeling? I do. I'm not currently modeling any sports, but I've done a ton of sports modeling in the past. Who are my top 5 lyrical rappers? Wow. I think you got to go with Eminem. You got to go with Dr. Dre. You got to go with Lil Wayne. When you're from a pure lyrical standpoint, I think you got to go with Ludacris, and you have to go with. I'm not a rap music fan, but I was 17 once, guys. I was in high school once, and that's just what you listen to in high school. I'm sorry. I had nothing but rap music on my iPod and listened to nothing but 97.9 The Beat and K104, the 2 rap stations here in Dallas, Fort Worth. I went through that phase, so I know who the rappers are, but Eminem, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, Ludacris, and who am I forgetting? Lil Wayne. Yeah. Do you think there's any chance Donald Trump has controlled opposition? Well, of course there's a chance. I think there was probably a window of time where I would have given that theory some thought, but no, I really do think he's the reason the political establishment hates Donald Trump so much and still does. The number one thing they fear the most is him running again, and he's going to, and he's going to win. But the reason they don't like him is because he can't be bought and sold, because everything in Washington is controlled by buying and selling politicians. Politicians sell themselves out to the highest bidder, and if they don't do that, then they'll get blackmail put on them, and then they'll be forced to play ball. So they hate Trump because he's too rich to be bought and sold, and he has no blackmail, like nothing that they can use against him in terms of blackmail. Washington is set up to where in order to advance your political career, you pretty much have to sell yourself out, or they will do it for you, right? It's pretty much like, because money is such a big deal when it comes to being elected in the first place, that in order to get elected, you have to raise a lot of money. And a lot of the money these politicians raise have strings attached to it. And so they have no choice but to play ball, right? But Donald Trump doesn't have to answer to anybody. He doesn't have any blackmail on him. So they can't control him. And that's honestly why they hated him so much. It had nothing to do with him being a racist or a misogynist or anything. That was just cover for the real reasons they hated him. They hated him because he couldn't be controlled and didn't play by the Washington rules. And they're doing everything in their power to keep him from running again, but it's not. He's going to run again. And if you look at the polls that I trust, there's a lot of polls out there I don't trust, but having done political research as a career for so many years, the people who poll the stuff that I do trust, if Donald Trump ran against Joe Biden today, he would crush him, like, easily. Who's my favorite NBA team? I mean, it used to be the Mavericks back when they were likable, but they're hard to like these days. So I don't really have a favorite NBA team now. I like the Jazz just because they're a defensive first team, and I like defense in the NBA. I wish Donovan Mitchell was a little bit more likable, but it used to be the Mavericks back when I worked at ESPN. And then I liked the Rockets when I was a kid because my dad, growing up in Houston, was a big Akeem fan. Back when they had Clyde the Glide, Akeem Olajuwon, Vernon Maxwell, Mario Elliott, Robert Horry, Sam Cassell. Ludacris is underrated lyrically. Oh, he's a great lyricist. Ludacris, he's great. Pruitt Fitness. I did a 12-team parlay 2 weeks ago. All my football picks covered, and it came down to the Denver Nuggets, and they missed the spread by 2 points. Well, why didn't you hedge? That's my question. Or you should have hedged or took the buyout. I've never heard of Dizzy Rascal. What do I think about AI sports betting? Do I think bots will become better than humans? No, because I believe any AI that's used to bet on sports, I think, is going to be used to set the lines and not bet. The real money is to be made in booking. And if you have strong AI, you'd want to use that to set lines and book bets rather than lay bets. So no. Richard Niven. Oddshark has AI betting. Yeah, it's not worth anything, Richard Niven. It's a gimmick. Rashim, do you believe the world moves through transaction of goods and services? Of course it does. That's what everything in the world is based on. Josh Hilton Outdoors. What did I do at ESPN? I worked at ESPN Radio. I was an intern, and then I was a producer for a little bit. I did sports radio for a couple years in 3 markets: Dallas, Jacksonville, Florida, and Las Vegas. And sports radio, I never realized how boring it was until I did it for 2 years. So boring. Like, there's only so much you can talk about the Cowboys before you get bored. And try living in a market like Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, there's only so much you can talk about the Jaguars and University of Florida football before you get bored. Well, even in Las Vegas, I thought I'd like it in Las Vegas with the sports betting angle, but you have to deal with a lot of touts on those stations, which is the real reason I hated it there. But yeah, I was a radio producer. So a lot of what I have to do is get audio clips from the players before and after the games with interviews that we would use for sound bites on the radio. How did Joe Biden win? I don't want to get banned, so I will not say it. But let's just say that I will say this. I think there's a lot of bad actors out there that, like the Sidney Powells of the world, that like say that Dominion voting machines were corrupt and, you know, that type of stuff, like the way out there theories about election fraud that discredited the actual legitimate things that did happen in terms of the election. Like, what really happened is that a lot of these states were able to suspend a lot of their voter integrity laws on the books in the name of COVID. Like, for example, in Michigan, we're not allowed to have poll watchers because of COVID, right? We don't want the poll workers to get sick, so we can't have anybody monitoring the polls. Or in Wisconsin, usually you had to have like a reason, and you had to have 2 witness signatures to get an absentee ballot in Wisconsin. That was the law. But they suspended that law for the 2020 election and just sent out mail ballots to everybody, right? But that law was suspended by decree. It wasn't voted on. It wasn't repealed by the state legislature. The Supreme Court even ruled that that wasn't allowed to happen, but it happened anyway. So you had a lot of these states unilaterally suspending their election integrity laws that were able to circumvent a lot of these safeguards and stuff on elections, and that's how ultimately Joe Biden was going to get over the top, because it basically became like the Wild West in a lot of these states that were able to use COVID as a reason to say, oh, we're not going to have signature verification, we're not going to do voter ID checks, we're going to mail out absentee ballots to everybody, we're not going to have poll watchers, like that type of stuff, all under the name of COVID. Which is why they want to keep COVID alive, because they want to try to run that same playbook again in 2022 and 2024 if they can. But that's how he won. I mean, just these states were able to suspend a lot of things that were a check against a lot of these things. And ballot harvesting. Illegal in every state but California, but it certainly happened in all these states as well. What is my dream job? It's always been a a color commentator for any professional sports team. Not NFL, because there's only 16 games, but like an NBA or MLB. Probably MLB. It's never going to happen, but that's always been my dream job. Yep. Oh yeah, sports radio is so boring. I don't listen to it. I haven't listened to it in years because it's so repetitive. There's only, and especially national sports radio these days, all they talk about is LeBron and beefs and the NFL. It's just boring, and so that's the issue I have. Have you ever gambled, such as poker or card counting? I have counted cards at a blackjack table, and I have been backed off. You got to be really careful. The pit bosses are very good at spotting counters. And there's so many anti-counting measures these days. Like, where did I play blackjack at? It was at the M in Las Vegas, and they dealt all the cards face down, which made it hard to count. You have the automatic shuffler, shoes, cut cards. And then places that don't do stuff like that, like El Cortez, they're going to be watching you like a hawk, and they're going to back you off the second they pick up on your patterns. So the juice isn't worth the squeeze, because a lot of people are like, oh, you don't have to count cards you can throw them off. But like I said, if you throw them off, you're just cutting into the small edge the already small edge you have counting cards at blackjack. It's not even worth it. I think it's better to play full pay video poker. But like I said at the beginning of the stream, I wish I did poker more when I lived in Las Vegas. Yeah, the Clippers without Paul George, and they thought it was going to be an easy cover, and they didn't. Yeah. What's my favorite place to visit on the East Coast? It depends. Do you mean the entire Eastern Seaboard? Because that's going to be Charleston, South Carolina. But I also like Cape Cod in Massachusetts. A lot of family vacations there. And I like Miami too. But Charleston, South Carolina is definitely number one. I love Charleston. I love going there for work when I worked for Raycom. All right. What do I prefer most? The martingale strategy or arbitrage betting? Definitely arbitrage. I think the martingale strategy is stupid. You're going to lose money. Definitely arbitrage. I don't like either, though, but I would pick arbitrage over martingale. SpongeBob says, you said you don't like parlays before, but what's your thoughts on the same game parlays where you may take the defensive team under or offensive team and over? If you're allowed to do it, go ahead. If you're allowed to, if there's a book out there that lets you do same game parlays, go ahead. I mean, I still think it's better just to bet the bets separately, but knock yourself out because I do think that the risk is a lot lower with the same game parlays in that situation. Eric Catherine, how are you doing? Glad to see you. Yeah, I mean, the juice is worth the squeeze if you travel and you have the bankroll to pull it off, but pit bosses are too good these days. They know what counters do. Have I ever watched the CFL? No, I have not. Baller02 says, what should I do in Charleston? I'm visiting in March. I just like Charleston for the ambience. It's like it feels like you take a step back in time almost. I mean, you have your beaches. If you're going in March, it might be a little too cold to go to the beach, but they just have a lot of, it's very charming. Let's put it that way. And it's the South. There's a lot of Southern hospitality in Charleston. Although, if you're really looking for true Southern hospitality, I would probably go to a place like Birmingham, Savannah, maybe even Greenville. But Charleston is kind of like a lot of old money, a lot of snobbery, so to speak. So it's definitely not for everybody. Will I visit Pennsylvania? I mean, I was there last year. I have family that lives in the new Philadelphia area. I went to a couple of weddings there. It's weird. I've never been to Pittsburgh. I've been to Erie and I've been to Philadelphia. That's it. Well, yeah, I mean, the juice isn't worth the squeeze counting cards and blackjack. You just got to know where the pit bosses are going to be weak. Anthony Morris, even on a site called Sports Betting Truth, they don't tell the truth. The idea that sports betting for profit is hard is a lie. It's actually ridiculously easy if you only bet futures. I mean, you got to have a pretty good model to bet futures, and you have to have a lot of patience. You have to be okay with your money being tied up. But I will say this, a lot of my money made in college basketball last year was on March Madness futures, for those of you that remember that. That's where I pretty much made all my money in the NCAA tournament last year. So you're not wrong. You just have to have a good model to be able to take advantage of it. And most people don't. You have to put in a lot of work for a futures-based model because you got to run a lot of Monte Carlo simulations. And really just team-based futures. Players-based futures are a lot harder to do because it's more arbitrary. It's not really something you should measure. All right, it's 8:49. I've been on the air for what, an hour and 19 minutes now? I'll go till 9. I'll go for another 11 minutes. So I rebooted my Bumble account today. Switching gears here, just talking about random things. I rebooted my Bumble account today. So I deleted all my dating apps back in November just because I had so many matches. It was hard. I wouldn't say it was hard to keep up, but it was hard to know what I really wanted. Because when you have like so many matches that are like attractive women that you talk to and you like, it's kind of like, okay, what do I do? I don't know what I really want. So it was more, I deleted them all just to take a step back and kind of reflect, okay, what do I really want? Right? And so I haven't restarted my Hinge or Tinder accounts yet, but I did restart my Bumble account today, but I haven't swiped anyone yet. I just set up the profile. I just set up my pictures in the profile, so we'll see how that goes. The best match I ever got in terms of like a relationship and everything came off of Bumble when I was living in Louisville. Hinge was weird. I got a lot of matches on Hinge. Like I used Hinge for the first time back in late October, November this last year, and I got so many matches on Hinge. And it was like you have all these good girls you're talking to, and you want to go out with them, and then all of a sudden you get a notification of a new girl, right? That's more attractive and more fun to talk to and everything, and it makes all the other girls you just had been talking to like seem, not as attractive, or you're not as willing to meet them up anymore. And I just felt bad. I felt bad because, like there's one girl I talked to, like I was, making plans to go out with her and everything. And then this other girl like matches with me, and I just liked her more. And so I just had to be honest with the old girl and be like, hey, I'm just not feeling it anymore. And it kind of came out of nowhere because it happened so fast. But that's why I deleted Hinge, because I couldn't, I feel like I was breaking too many hearts, and like it seemed like every match I would get would be more exciting and more interesting than the last one. So I just deleted the account. Maybe I'll download it again, but we'll see how Bumble goes first. Illibet, do you ever use insurance in your bets? Do you advise it? I don't know what you mean by insurance. Like hedging? I definitely think hedging is a good thing in parlays. Blackjack insurance, no. Steele, do you believe Vegas already decided the national championship, begging for Bama money? No, and that's why I think Alabama's going to win. All the squares are on Georgia. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of guys who would be in my shoes, but they did a study, like I think it was with honey or jam or something like that. But the more they brought a bunch of people into like a grocery store and presented them with like 2 options for jelly, and then like they presented another group of people like 25 options for jelly. And it actually turned out the people with more options were more frustrated and less confident in their decision, because when you have so many options, it's like, okay, how do I like differentiate? Like, how do I know I'm making the right choice? And that's how I felt on Hinge. Like, it just seems like I had a lot of options, and then it seemed like, oh, here's a notification for a new match that's like, oh, I like her a lot more than this girl I've been leading on for the past few days. And then I'd have to like let her down. But I'm always honest. I never ghost. Ghosting's horrible. I think it's immature. If I'm not interested in you anymore, I'm going to let you know. And I'm going to be blunt. And I feel like that's a lot better than just ghosting. So, but I was tired of having to tell girls, hey, I'm just not feeling it anymore, because someone better came along. I really was. And so I deleted the account. Yep. I think chemistry is a big deal. Yeah, there's a lot of good-looking girls I would match with that were just so boring to talk to. Like, no substance, no depth at all. Looks can only get you so far. Have I ever told a girl no? Yeah, all the time. Do I like Bumble because women make the first move? That's probably not why I like it. I just think it has higher quality of women on there. Like, I'm not a big fan of Tinder, just because I feel like people are a little bit less serious on there. A lot of trash is on there. I'd say Tinder's more of a hookup app, and I feel like I'm too old for that now. So if you're looking for more serious, then it's definitely Bumble and Hinge are the way to go. And I definitely had much higher quality matches on both of those apps in the past. But the thing that people don't know about Bumble is that you're the first like 72 hours on the app are critical, because that's when it calculates your ELO score. Speaking of models, it calculates like an ELO score for you. And if you do really bad the first 72 hours, your ELO score is going to be so low, you're practically invisible to everybody. So you really have to like have a strong profile to start out with. Is it mathematically impossible to make a living out of sports betting? It's not mathematically impossible, but it's very, very difficult, to the point where I don't think it's worth it. I would not try. Let's see. I wonder if I could show you guys my... Oh, yeah, I went out with a girl one time, and she showed me her Tinder account, and she had, like 5,000 likes in her Likes You Tinder Gold thing, and she had like 700 something matches. So if you're ever on one of these apps and a girl just stops talking to you, just remember that she probably has thousands of matches and everything like that. That's the real reason most girls ghost you, is because someone better came along. There was another guy in the picture. But yeah, I haven't swiped anything yet on my new Bumble account. I just set up my profile, so maybe I can get to doing that when I'm done with the stream. which I'm going to end here pretty soon. Yeah, I'm so mad about this camera. Like the lens is broken. Not the lens, but the zoom. Like it's permanently stuck in like the zoom in the most. Not only that, and it won't focus, so I don't think it's worth fixing it. Yeah, the jelly analogy. The more options you have, the more indecisive you're going to be. And that's so true. It's like when I was in St. Louis, and I was like, where do I go eat? Like, you have so many options. I would rather like have 2 options, Waffle House and McDonald's. That's easy decision, but when you have dozens of options, it's hard to make a good choice. Do I miss Las Vegas? There's parts about it I miss, but there's parts about it I'm glad I'm away from. Like, I'm glad I'm not there for the mask mandates. But there are parts I miss. I feel like Las Vegas is a very accessible city. Really not a lot of traffic. It's easy to get around. There's a lot to do, but I don't miss the mask mandates. Do I believe in red pill and black pill? Yes. Although there's parts of the red pill dating community I agree with and disagree with. I feel like sometimes they come across a little too bitter, but I definitely believe they make a lot of good points. Do I have a type? I do have a type, but it's probably hard to describe. I definitely go for more of like the cute girls rather than like the how do you put it? The sexy girls, I guess, so to speak. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Instagram hoes, so to speak, with the beasting lips and the fake tans and all that. I'm not a big fan of that at all. I prefer more of the down-to-earth types. How's the food in Las Vegas? It's great. If you like food, that's a great place to be. I miss Giordano's. I miss Juan's. I miss... The one thing I really miss they really haven't brought back yet is the buffets. I love the buffets. Texas Longhorns fan. I've definitely dated my share of UT grads. Must hate Taco Bell. I don't hate Taco Bell. It just seems like every time I go there, I go there like once a year, right? Taco Bell. And it always seems like it's going to be so great. But then when I'm done eating it, I'm like, wow, that wasn't that great. And then, for the next year, I'm like, I don't want Taco Bell. It sucked the last time. But then they'll come out with a new item, and I'll see the commercial, and then I'll want to go get it. And I'll go get some Taco Bell, and I'll be disappointed again. All right, yeah, I'm about to call it a quits for this stream. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I feel like tonight was a success. I'll try to be back every Wednesday night doing this in the future. I have a reaction video coming out. I'll try to get it up tomorrow. I'd like for Thursdays to be the Thursday Truth videos and Mondays to be the reaction videos, so I might not upload it till Monday. But yeah, I did film a reaction video this morning, so that will be going up sometime. Would I date a North African girl one day? Probably not. No offense if you are one, but that's just not my type. And does anyone work at Arby's? Great question. That's a great comment to close the stream on Bobby Robeson. Anyway, I'm about to go swipe on my Bumble account, so let's see if anything comes of it. Until then, thanks everyone for tuning in. I will be back next Wednesday. You've been watching Sports Betting Truth.